Hello, my name is Joe Hyder. I'm a board member for the Stark County Beekeepers. I get to discuss getting bees a good start. You've already had talks on bee biology, equipment, and finding a location. So there's a lot of information there. Um, we're going to discuss, you know, getting your bees and getting them in your box. So we're going to take it another step further. So we're starting to get to some of the fun stuff. Um, I got a slideshow and some videos to show you, and then we'll have questions and answers at the end. You can also, while this is going on, you can, if you have a question, you can put it in the chat down at the bottom. Giving bees a good start. You put a lot of effort and money into getting your equipment, getting everything all set up. You need to do a little bit of work on finding someone to order your bees from. Decide how you want to get them, whether you want to get a package or a nuke or a full size hive. Of course, there's a lot to think about there, and the price goes up with all of them. Um, but we typically um, teach packages for the beginner bee school. It's the cheaper way to go, but there's three ways of getting bees for beginners: packages, swarms, uh, which are fun to do, but not necessarily for a beginner, and nukes, which is a small colony that's getting ready to take off. So let's start with packages. So you you can order your packages. They'll come in. Whoever you order them from will have a date for you to pick them up. You'll go pick up a container, wood box like you see here in the picture, and it'll have 2 or 3 pounds of bees in there and a queen. In this queen cage and this sugar syrup can will be down in here and they'll all be locked up in there. It's a pretty convenient way uh, to get bees. Um, you order them from a local vendor and you go and pick them up, then that's all on you to go and get them when they come in and get them home. If they are mailed to you, funny story. A friend of mine had them mailed to her, and as soon as those bees hit the post office in her local town, the postmaster gave her a call and said, "Your bees are here. Please come get them." And so she rushed down there because she was all excited to get her bees. She's like, "Where's my bees?" And they'll be over in the corner, sitting over there, waiting for you to pick them up. Um, so she grabbed them and took them home and installed them. The other thing with getting them through the mail is if you have a postmaster that will deliver them to your house, um, they're just going to set them out there. Uh, they don't care if they're sitting in the sun. They don't care if they're sitting out in a rainy day. They don't care what the weather's like. So when you're going to get bees, if you're getting them through the mail, you need to pay attention to what's going on. If you're supposed to get bees, you're going to, have to take some time to be there when the bees arrive so you can put them inside if the weather's bad, or you can go straight and install them. They're not sitting out uh, in bad weather or in the heat of the day or wind. Um, one beginner one year was on vacation for a week and she came home and her bees had died. They were sitting out there and got soaking wet and died. So be aware that if you're getting a package, you need to deal with it in a timely manner. So here's a queen cage with a queen in it. There's another one that has attendants and has some candy over here. So these attendants can eat candy and feed the queen. This queen over here is going to need fed by bees in the colony that you're sticking her in or in the package. When you get a package, you need to make sure that this queen is alive. I had a lady call me after she installed her package, and she called me the next day and she goes, "Well, the queen was in the cage, but she wasn't moving. Um, that's not good. You, you need to make sure she's alive and well before you install all your bees. If she's not, you can go back to your package supplier and see if you can get a new queen. You got to have a good viable queen to get going. Now here's how these packages are made. Um, you see this guy here with this essentially a big box of bees in this funnel. He's funneling them down in here, and it looks like a scale. He's weighing out 2 to 3 pounds of bees, and then they'll put them in packages over here, and then they'll put in a mated queen in the cage with these bees. Now these bees and the mated queen that is in the cage are not related. The bees that they pour in could be from an apiary miles and miles away, and the mated queens could have been ordered in, or they may have raised them, but they raised them miles and miles away. So they're not related. So there's an introductory period that you have to do to make sure that that queen is accepted by these bees. And it usually takes, 4 or 5 days. And you'll need to ask your supplier how long to do that. When I first got into bees, it was 2 days and I could release queens and I was good. These days, it's more like 4 or 5. I don't know why it's taking longer, but it seems to be from where I get my bees. If your bees are coming from California and this queen is with these bees for 3 days in a truck and another day before you pick them up and then you install them because the weather was bad another day later, well, these bees have already been together for 4 or 5 days. So you may be able to release that queen sooner after you install them. Let them get used to the box, go back the next day and check. Do the finger test and see, excuse me, and see if the bees are acting nice to the queen. And if they are, you can release her. Packages cost a lot less. They are available earlier in the year. They come from, the southern states where it's warm. They package the bees up. They bring them up. If you order a package, you are gonna start from the very beginning. Introduce of the queen. You got all foundation in your hives. You're gonna feed them. You're gonna see them draw that out step by step, and you get to learn an awful lot when you start with a package. There's a lot of timely stuff to do as a new beekeeper. And sometimes it helps if you have a mentor to help you out with this stuff. Cons to a package. Well, you do need to feed them, but that's not really I wouldn't call that a con. You just have to feed them to get them going. because we generally get packages in. I mean, packages will be coming in late March, early April. We may not have any flowers for the bees to go and get food. Um, all depends on the weather. Uh, so you gotta, supply food to keep them alive till there's food for them to go get. Okay, so here's a better picture of the package with the bees in it. Here's the can installed. The bottom picture here is the guy shaking the bees out into his hive. This picture here is pretty important. They installed his queen cage in here. He used a thumbtack, and you'll also see this in the video. But we're going to play that video now.
Hi, it's April 5th, early. We're going to do a package installation to demonstrate how that's done. And before you get started with your package installation, you need to set out all your tools, everything that you need. You need a smoker, which you won't use, but you want to have it available and lit and ready to go. We have our package of bees. We have an entrance reducer. A bee brush comes in very handy with these because we're not going to use a lot of smoke. We have a hive tool. We keep an extra one in our back pocket, so when we lose this, we have that. We have a hive top feeder. We've got an inner cover and a lid, and we've got a vent box that's going to go on top. Over here, we've put the hive. We've got the hive ready to go. We've got a screen bottom board. We have put on that screen bottom board a box with undrawn foundation, and we're going to separate those, and we're going to show you how to do this. Always want to wear a hat or a veil. At least I usually wear a veil or wear a jacket, a bee jacket. But when you've got bees in a box or in a package, you want to look at your bees. These are fairly calm. There's a little bit of movement. If you look at this side of the package, there's not that much movement. These bees are calm. If you see your bees running around inside the package, that probably means they're getting hot. Don't overheat your bees. It's only about 65 degrees today, which is a perfect day for installation. Bees can be out in your garage in 40, 50, 60 degree weather. That's fine, just as long as there's not air on them, and they'll be fine in this package. They're better off in that condition than they are in your house at 70 degrees. Like I said, if they start to run around, you might want to mist this with just some water to cool them down and give them something to drink. Inside of this package, we have a can that feeds them, and for their trip. These bees have been in this package for about 3 days because they were shook about 3 days ago, and they're going to be installed today. So usually there's a cover on top of the can, which I just took off. There's usually a strap up here. They vary from manufacturer to manufacturer, but that's attached to your queen cage. So the first thing you do is you do a bump. So all the bees are clustered in the top of and you want to get the bees to drop to the bottom so you can pull this can out. If you try and pull the can out, all the bees are going to be stuck to it, and you're going to be trying to pull the bees and scrape the bees off instead of just doing just a quick bump like that. The bees drop to the bottom. You use your hive tool to grab this. Before you pull this out, make sure you've got a handle on your queen cage, and then we've got the bees in the bottom, and this is their feeder can. It has a few holes poked in it, and you just set that aside. That's done its job. So now we have the queen in a cage. We didn't bump very hard, so there's still a lot of bees on that. We can use this hive tool to scrape down. And what we're looking for on this is we want to make sure that the queen is alive. And I can see that she's a nice queen. She's in there by herself. She's walking around, and that's perfect. That's all we need to do. Also, there's a candy side of this. On this particular one, we are not going to release her right away. We're going to leave her in the cage. There's a cork on the end of the candy. You can pop that cork when she's ready to be released, but we're going to put her in there for a day, come back tomorrow, test and see if the bees are being aggressive like this. They don't seem to be being aggressive right now, but it's kind of hard to tell because they're pretty stressed. We're going to give them a day, come back and look and see how she's doing. So if they're sticking when you rub your hand across there and gripping to the screen, that means that they're being aggressive and they want to sting her. But these bees look fairly calm on her, but we're going to give them. We don't want to release her right now. We're going to give her some more time. Okay, trying to see if there's anything noticeable on these bees. They seem to be acting normal on her cage. So we bring the cage over. The first thing we want to do is we're going to insert the cage. Normally I don't try to insert the cage in the middle of the box. I usually try and insert it in the back, third, and as you can see, don't have to take this out, but for demonstration purpose, we want the screen facing this way or facing that way. We don't want the screen facing into the side of the foundation, because we want to have these bees have access to that queen to feed her, take care of her, and make sure that she's all right. So then we just take and we bend this over. Sometimes these straps are a little bit thinner, and you can actually hang them over a toothpick or a stick or a twig. So there you have it. The queen's been installed. We're going to push our frames together, and then we're going to dump our bees. You don't need to recover this package. You don't need to put bees on top of it or recover the bees. They're just going to hang out, and if you look around, there's bees flying, but they're going to find home. So you just want to dump your package. Just a little bit of shaking, a little bit of movement. And if you look, we've got the majority of the bees out, but we're going to go a little bit further because we want to have the bees, we want to get 90% of these bees out. We only want to have a few left. So you bang them down to the one side, bang them back, and you've got a pretty clean box. We can set this box on the ground now in front of the hive. Those bees will come out and they'll find their way in. So now we've got all these bees. They're surrounding the queen. They don't know where they're at. This is a whole new home for them. 3 days ago they were in Georgia. Today they're in Ohio. So they need to do, if you look around, there's a lot of orientation flights going on. Bees are just flying in circles, trying to orient themselves to the hive. So what we like to do is, what's an important part is just give them a little piece of pollen patty. There's nothing in this hive for them to eat. So we're going to feed them two things. We're going to feed them protein, which is pollen patty, and we're going to feed them some sugar water, which is their carbohydrate. So we're just going to enter this on the top bars. Right next to the queen. The queen's right here. So that, you know, they're gonna cluster around that queen. We want them to cluster on this. You can see actually these bees are starting to munch on this pollen patty already. The protein, they need the protein to develop brood food. They can develop some from the fats that they carry in their body, but the protein addition helps. They're going to start, by the end of the day, probably within an hour or so, we're going to see pollen coming into this hive. But bees can't consume pollen. They need to make it into bee bread, which takes about 2 weeks. So for the first 2 weeks, this pollen patty is very important to the hive to keep it healthy and so they don't have all their reserves down. If you take a look at this bee, if we can zoom in on that bee, you can see it's fanning, and at the very tip, you can see their Nasonov gland, and their Nasonov gland is up. So at this point, what we want to do is we want to add the feeder, and so we need to push the bees off. Usually we use smoke to move bees around, but I don't want to smoke these bees because I want them to be able to smell where the queen is, because this is a new area. I want them to be I want them to move into the hive and be able to smell the queen so they're moving in. And I want to get the feeder on and get this hive closed up as quick as I can. And the reason I want to do that is I wanted to start using the entrance. Okay. So we put that on, we put the feeder on. We're only going to put about a quart or two, maybe a half gallon of feed. I'm only going to put it in one side. The bees will come up and feed on this. When they're done with that, I'll add more. Try and get the inner cover on. And then we're going to put a vent box on top of this. So moisture will build up from this feeder. So you need to have some ventilation, either a vent box or put some popsicle sticks underneath this inner cover. Either way, it works pretty well. And then I'm going to add the top. There you have it. That's how you install a package. You can also add an entrance reducer to get them down to about 3 or 4 inches on the entrance. That helps them with their protection. Thanks for watching.
Okay, that was a pretty good video on installing a package by Jeff Gabrick. He's a beekeeper just north of Columbus. So he was having pretty good weather that day. You could get these packages and the weather be bad. I've gotten them, it's been snowing outside. You bring them home, put them in a dark, cool place. Not freezing, but cool. And you may want to spray them down with a sugar syrup solution, a 1-to-1 ratio. If you're gonna, keep them in a package for a little while until the weather breaks, and then go out and install them. We're gonna move on to nukes next. So a nuke is just a small colony. The queen's already introduced. She's laying eggs, and there should be brood in all stages in there. Eggs, larva, pupa, cat brood. Everything should be in there. These nukes come in these cardboard boxes sometimes. They don't always come in wood. Sometimes you have to take the box back, and sometimes you don't. So I would encourage you to get a nuke box. They're fun to have one, even if you get a package, because if something happens with your bees and you get a chance for a swarm, or you just have the opportunity to use that box, you'll have it. When you get a nuke, since the colony's already up and running, you can see everything from the very start. They're easier to put in your equipment, but you don't learn as much as fast. So I guess that's a negative, but a package, you're starting at the very beginning, where a nuke, the beekeeper has done a lot of that work at the beginning for you, and you're taking it from here and putting it in a bigger colony or a bigger box, and moving forward from there. Nukes are usually available later in the year. You can get some overwintered nukes a little earlier, but generally, nukes are later in the year. You can get them May and in June. It depends on the producer. Some of the nukes have overwintered queens, and some of the nukes will have newly raised queens. So in Ohio, it takes time for the weather to be warm and nice, so that beekeeper can raise queens to make these nukes up to sell. So you're looking at later in the year. Uh, Cost, the nukes cost, I don't know, $160 and up. Um, you look all around and find them. Uh, ask ask the bee club, people that you know, and where to get them.
All right, today we're gonna do a little demonstration on installing a nuke. I'm going to go through some equipment that we need first. Um, you're gonna need a hive tool. You're gonna want your smoker lit. This isn't lit. Nice warm day in May, you would light it. This is a nice cold day in February, so I'm not lighting it. Maybe I should have, get some heat off of it. But tool, smoker, veil. I bring an extra box to set the nuke on, and I've got my hive already set up here. I have a nuke sitting on top, but I have a hive down here. It's a deep, 10 frame deep. I have a feeder on already, and I have my entrance reducer in. So what we're going to do is install these, and I want to talk a little bit about when you get your nuke. They'll come in wood, they can come in cardboard like this. A lot of suppliers use these. Sometimes you may have to return the box. Another thing is when you're ordering these nukes is to make sure that you're ordering the same size as your equipment. This is a deep nuke. This is a deep box. They match. So these frames will go right in that box. If you have all mediums, then you would want to order a nuke in mediums from a supplier. When you go to pick up these nukes, pay attention to the supplier. He'll tell you to come get them in the morning or after dark. That way it gives him a time to go and close the bees up. So he'll close them up. For you to take home. Sometimes there'll be a strap around them. So you can take it, put it in your car. Now if the weather's real nice and it's in the morning and you're picking this up, you come home, you can set it on your box and start the installation process. If it's dark or bad weather, you bring it home, set it on top of your hive that you're going to install them in, open it up, and you'll probably have a couple days until the weather gets nice, and then you can install them. But for demonstration purposes today, we're going to install them. So, I'll put my box here. Take my lid off. Take my inner cover off. It's got 10 frames in here. I'm going to take 6 of them out. I like to have some extra space to work with. Okay. Now we'll go and open up the nuke. If there's bees in here, should be quite a few. There should be bees on 3-4 frames. You want three frames of brood in here and a frame of pollen and honey. You know, there may be one frame like this one of foundation in there. That's okay. But you just pull these out, use your hive tool, you pull them out. Now I take it out this way. It's on that side of the box. Here's the front. I'm going to keep them in the same order. So I'm going from here to here, bees and all. So like this frame's drawn out. This is an old frame, but there'd be bees all over this. Hopefully a good brood area on both sides. You can kind of see where the brood used to be, that darker area. Alright, then you put them in. And just move slow and you keep going. You just move, put them in. Everybody wants to look for the queen. And if you do, you might see her. But it's more important that you see eggs. If you see eggs, you know the queen's been in here laying within the last 3 days. And put them all in. I usually slide these over and then slide my last one in. And I keep all the frames together. Now I kept those 5 frames out of this nuke together. In a couple weeks when the bees are expanding, you may want to take one of these frames on the outside and move it in to get the bees to expand. That's a good thing to do later. I like to leave them together at this point for a couple weeks. The 5 extra frames that you have can go in your nuke if you get to keep it. You got to take it back and just store your old frames somewhere. Now I have a Boardman feeder in the front, but for demonstration purposes, I have a hive top feeder. This is an old B-Max top feeder. Has this little plastic piece that goes in here. So the bees go up through the slot, come up, they go down, drink, come back up, go back in. When I was a beginner, I really liked this feeder because I could put the lid on and I could come back and check and see if the syrup's there, and the bees aren't flying out at me because this plastic piece keeps the bees contained. But you can put a couple gallons of feed in there, syrup, and come back and check on them as much as you want. You may not have to feed that much. If it's late May going into June, the bees may be finding plenty of nectar and may not take much syrup at all. So what I do is I keep all my equipment together. So I'd put my inner cover back on here. I would plug this hole. Put my lid on. And there, the nuke is installed.
Okay, that video was really hard to do with no bees and freezing and everything else that was going on that day. But I think you get the general idea that you know, take the frames and the bees out of the box, put them in the next bigger box, and keep them all together and in the same order. Don't be spinning them around and all that. One thing I did forget in the video was to shake the bees out of the box like you would with a package. Bang on the box and get all the bees out and make sure they all go in to the colony that you want them in, the bigger hive. Okay, we're going to move on to swarms. they're a free source of bees if you can find them. Swarms don't happen abundantly every year. Some years are really good, other years are really bad. So you take your chances if you're gonna try and catch a swarm, because you may not catch one. Swarms do work if you have a beginner and a mentor working together. They can work together and catch a swarm and go through the whole process of hiving it, feeding it, and getting started. It's pretty tough to do all by yourself if you've never done it before and you don't exactly know how you're going to react with a bunch of bees flying around. This is a picture of me, actually, with a ladder in my truck. This is Mother's Day in May, and a swarm came out of my hive beside my garage and went up in the tree, and my daughter was there. And she's like, "Well, Dad, I'll climb up and get it." And she did. And it was interesting. We probably shouldn't have done it, but she did it, and everything turned out okay. But, it's really not what you should do. I mean, either one of us could have got hurt and had medical bills piling up, and it's really not worth it over the price of a package. Another way to get a swarm is to put out a swarm box and lure them in. It's a pretty neat way. You build a box, stick it out there, bait it up with some swarm lure, and you check it every so often. Find a good place to put it. But like I said, swarms don't happen all the time. Some years are better than others. If you want bees this year, I would still suggest you get a package or a nuke. And if a swarm happens to show up, then those are bees of opportunity that you may be able to get and increase your apiary with. A couple things about swarms. I think everybody's seen the videos of swarms where a guy goes out, they're on a limb, and he, bare hand, no veil, everything. He clips the limb, he puts the limb and the bees in the box and walks away. He's got his bees. That doesn't happen very often. Safety first. You should wear a veil all the time. You don't know how long those bees have been there. If they've been there for a few days, they could be defensive. If they just got there, usually they are pretty easy to deal with. Another thing to look out for is when there's a swarm around, and if you get a call to go get it, there's gonna be people around. Kids especially, they're cautious, but you'll be all suited up with all your veil and maybe even a smoker going or whatever, and you'll turn around and there'll be kids 10 feet away watching you. So be careful when you go to get a swarm. I've gotten several from downtown in the city. People were walking by, and you just want to be careful. You don't want anybody to get stung. People freak out anyway when they see a swarm because they don't really understand what's going on. But it is the normal reproductive process for bees. It's how bees have been able to survive for hundreds of years. And today's times, with there being lots of people around in cities, and cameras and video, swarms do get seen more than they used to. Okay, so you've got your bees, and both videos talked about feeding your bees. When you're going from this top right picture, this wax foundation, to this pretty white, all drawn out comb, it takes a lot of energy. And the bees need to be fed to get this done. Your first year as a beekeeper, you are trying to get as much comb pulled out and drawn as you can in the first year. I feed a 1-to-1 sugar syrup. So, 1 cup of water to 1 cup of sugar. 1 gallon of water to 1 gallon of sugar. However you want to measure it, 1-to-1. Mix it up. I warm mine up a little bit to mix it up. Some people do, some people don't. But they'll need that syrup. That's their carbohydrates for energy to get all the work done inside and outside of the hive. The upper left is a frame feeder. You pour your syrup in the feeder, you take out one of your frames in the hive, you put this in, the bees go down the hole, get the syrup, and they come out. Some people like these. There's all different kinds. Some of them work better than others. I would ask around to find a good one. I've not had luck with the ones that I got. The ones that I have, the bees go in, they get all bundled up in here, and then they knock each other into the syrup, and then you've got a mess. So the bees drown. It just didn't work out very good for me. But I only have one kind of feeder. You can check out other ones and see if they work better. Here's the hive top feeder, similar to what Jeff had in his picture or in his video installing the package. You put the syrup in there, the bees come up the middle, crawl down the screen, drink the syrup, and then go back up. This bottom left is a bee feeder that you can buy from any of the dealers in the area. You can stick it right on your inner cover. The bees come up the hole in the middle, get the syrup, and go back down. I have also used this feeder, and I just set it right on top of the frames. I don't use my inner cover. I just set it right in there. It's closer to the bees, and they can get to it easier. The bag method, you put your syrup in a bag, put a hole in it, flip it over, and put it on there. I've not tried it. I've heard it works. The pressure holds the syrup in the bag, and the bees suck that syrup right up. It doesn't get them all soaking wet, doesn't drown them and stuff. So there's several ways you can feed. The other part of feeding is a pollen patty. And I like to give my packages a small piece of pollen patty, like 2x2, a 3x3 section. Stick it in there, gives them something to eat. It's their protein, so it's similar to our steak. They need that. It helps in brood rearing. You'd be surprised with a colony that's starving for protein when you put this pollen patty on, how quick the brood rearing takes off, and they start raising more bees as soon as you put that on there. You come back in a couple of days, you can still notice a big difference. Word of caution about pollen patty is you want to put small pieces in, 2x2, 3x3, maybe even smaller. What you want is a piece that's big enough that the bees will eat it in a day or two, but not so big that it's going to sit there for a month. We have small hive beetles now in Ohio. Some places have them worse than others. And small hive beetles love pollen patties, and they'll lay their eggs in there. And you'll come back if you put in a big piece. You'll come back, and there'll be a bunch of worms crawling around your pollen patty, and that's small hive beetle larvae, and they're just uh, eating your pollen patty and get ready to mess with your hive. So it's a pest of the beehive that you don't want to encourage. When to stop feeding? I generally let the bees tell me when to stop feeding them. When it comes to syrup, they will just, all of a sudden they go from a half a gallon a day to maybe a pint or maybe nothing. They don't drink any of it. Well, then there's no sense putting any more on. Another time to stop the syrup is if you get all your brood boxes drawn out and you go to put a honey super on, you stop feeding. You do not feed when you have honey supers on. You do not want the bees making honey out of your sugar syrup. As far as the protein patty, the bees generally will take that most of the year, but it's really not necessary to feed a protein patty if you have a lot of pollen coming in and the bees have a lot of bee bread in the frames. So once you start seeing pollen coming in and you can see cells, orange and yellow cells of different colors of pollen, maybe a green, then you can stop feeding this pollen patty. Here's a picture of the bee bread I was talking about. I mean, if you see some of this in your hive, this is a cross section. But there's a good chance that the bees don't need you feeding pollen patties any longer once they have a bunch of this in their hive. Okay, so you've got your bees, showed you how to install them. If you need help installing your bees, because you're a beginner, you don't know exactly what's going on, how you're going to react, get a mentor, ask for help. Generally, there's a lot of beekeepers that are willing to help you and give you guidance throughout the year. Also, don't forget, to do your reading. Come to club meetings and learn more about what's going on. Hopefully, we can meet again in person here soon, because that's the best, and we can talk about what's going on one-on-one and give advice. Word of advice from a beekeeper is if you got a problem with your hive and you go and you ask 5 beekeepers, you'll probably get 20 answers. So sometimes the advice that you get is hard to work your way through. What you need to do is figure out what works for you and what you think's best with how you want to raise your bees. Okay, that's it. I think we're going to go to questions and answers next.